in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was about we need to streamline and everybody needs to be treated the same. And, you wouldn't accommodate as much. And now you really have to learn what works for everyone. And I've seen it, you get more out of your team if you, I hate to use the word accommodating, but because I don't think you need to lessen the outcome or lower your expectations in any way. But I feel like if you can understand your team on a personal level, you just work better. It gels better.
Welcome to Beyond the Ledger, real conversations with people driving business forward. I'm Troy Ashby, CPA and host. Each episode, we unpack stories, challenges, and insights from today's top accounting and finance leaders. This podcast is brought to you by my friends over at MarketScale. Welcome back to Beyond the Ledger. Today's guest is Krista Gaither, CFO of Plylar Construction, whose career spans between manufacturing, real estate, and construction, from Fortune 500 to middle market. We're going to hear her story and how she's been able to navigate those changes, and we're going to explore her mentorship style leadership. Thanks so much for coming in today, Krista. Guess we've known each other now for, a couple decades at this point? I think people are going to be able to learn a lot from you. You have changed between different industries. You've gone from small, medium, large, medium-sized companies. And I think there's some interesting things in there that people are going to be able to take away from your leadership style. But before we get started, why don't we rewind a little bit? How did you end up in accounting, finance?
Originally, I wasn't going to do accounting. When I was in high school, I wanted to do archaeology. But I went into accounting. It fit my personality, and my skill set was more towards accounting, and it just fit, and it's something that I pursued.
And how did you take a test? What was the thing that kind of pointed you to accounting then, if you just said it's more like your personality?
Necessity was what put me in accounting, needing a job, having a son early on, and needing to have a paycheck, and realizing that once I got into it, I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the challenge, the being able to tie things out, and all the nerdy parts of accounting. So that was something that I really liked, to be able to check those boxes early on. As I moved into it, the more challenging of being in management, obviously, is what's kept me in accounting.
Like security. You're looking for something secure,
yes,
a safer role. So I'm a first-generation college grad, and I knew I was going to college, but I didn't know why. And so I remember going to the library and pulling up the green screen, and I'm trying to figure out, good pay, stable, and then with some of my test scores, and it was engineering, accounting, and maybe something else. But that's kind of how I ended up in it too, was if I'm going to go to college, I want to make sure I have a job, not just a college degree.
Yes. Well, and early on, I had a professor that actually brought in some different accountants from different industries, like someone in the film industry. And I'm like, wow, everyone needs an accountant.
Right.
So it kind of opened up my eyes to what I could do. Maybe I'm not great at archaeology, but I guarantee you the project needs someone to be their accountant. So I was like, this could be something, one, stable, and two, that could open a lot of doors.
Absolutely. All right. So you leaped in, and so where did you end up? How did you start your career? Was it straight into industry? What did that look like?
Yeah, my first job actually was working for my family. My dad owned his own company, and I was 13, entering in payroll, know, and so learning a 10 key and things like that when I was little. From there, getting my first job working with him, and then going into college, and getting my first junior accountant job. I thought that was so cool, and had a business card. So it just continually challenging me, and being able to really focus on my education and continue that. I mean, education itself was a challenge because I had a young family, but um, continuing to challenge myself to get better. And I think that's where I've definitely enjoyed that part of it.
Right. And you've worked at companies of different sizes. CBRE, if anybody looks you up, massive #1 commercial real estate company in the country, right? Or maybe in the world. I don't know. You tell me. But so talk to me about that, right? You're a small fish. Even when you're a big fish, you're still a small fish in a huge pond. How's navigating that?
It was pretty scary in the beginning. Just because, working downtown Dallas and, being from a small town in North Texas. And so it was scary. But I had some great leadership to be able to encourage me and train me. And so I really feel that gave me a great opportunity to learn from being in a small company to a big company, like some of the great things about being in a big company, a big department. Everything's lined out in processes, and seeing the organization and being able to be a part of a huge pie, but you have a small piece in it, and being able to really focus on those small pieces. So that's what it allowed me when working for such a big company. But also being in that special niche of accounting, it kind of let me see other departments and what other things in accounting, like, we had our own tax department, and, you had your client accounting, and you had, there's so many different roles in accounting. So it just kind of solidified that accounting does have so many different opportunities.
You also get an opportunity to witness and see other strong leaders around you. So talk to me about your leadership style. What has worked for you, or maybe what are some things that you've noticed in other leaders that you've worked with that seems to help teams thrive?
I've learned from all types of different managers. Either I wouldn't say bad managers, but maybe they had bad traits. And then I've been very fortunate to have some amazing managers. My leadership style is really building the trust within your team, having that open door policy, put the human back into your human resources.
Yeah.
Really connect with your team, and don't be afraid to get on a personal level, because that helps you understand their strengths, their weaknesses. Maybe they have a confidence issue, or whatever the case may be. So I feel like having that trust within your team and being able to have that open door and kind of a safe haven for them to be able to come and talk to you about their challenges, or whatever the case may be. But and then on the flip side of that, where I've tried to make sure that my team doesn't see my frustration when they do come to me with a mistake, because I need to be able to have that level head and let's figure out this and move forward, and let's make sure we don't do this again. Because if you don't have that relationship with your team, how are they going to learn? And how are you going to be a better team going forward?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think earlier when you were talking about, one-on-ones or managing individually, I think that you're onto something, right? Because if you know them as an individual, you also know what motivates them. But if you try to manage everybody the exact same, you can't really get the same results. We're humans.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Yes. And we're also different.
And that takes a lot of trial and error. I think sometimes people want to put management into a system.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's much more fluid than that. We've got to constantly change and adapt and figure out what works for everyone. I would say probably, I'm going to age myself, but in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was about we need to streamline and everybody needs to be treated the same. And, you wouldn't accommodate as much. And now you really have to learn what works for everyone. And I've seen it, you get more out of your team if you, I hate to use the word accommodating, but because I don't think you need to lessen the outcome or lower your expectations in any way. But I feel like if you can understand your team on a personal level, you just work better. It gels better,
Yeah. It's culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? You spend a lot of time with people at work. And if you're there just to work and they're not widgets. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. I think you're onto something there. So talk to me a little bit about your leadership style. You don't get to CFO without having strong EQ leadership style. So how have you managed over the course of your career?
Early on, I was very aware of good management style and maybe not so good management style. So I really tried to pick up from the examples that I was given. Either this is something that I want to incorporate when I'm managing someone, or this is something I want to make sure I avoid doing. Because I knew being a junior level, seeing and how a manager reacted to certain problems and how that, disrupted the team. If they were someone that would get angry quickly or someone that would get super frustrated and show us that frustration and not be that leader in those instances, I tried to make sure that I'm not that way. I think it's important that you have an open door and that your team can come to you with problems without you getting super upset or super frustrated, that you be the voice of reason. And so I've tried to do that. I'm not always perfect. But I feel like if you spoke to anyone that's ever been on my team, they knew they could come to me, and I may not be able to solve their problem, but I would definitely work with them to get to where we needed to be.
Yeah. So you establish a lot of trust.
Yes, that's
Um,
very important in any
yeah.
team.
Yeah. And with the open door policy, that certainly helps. Are there other things that you feel like you've just fine tuned? I mean, you've been doing this for a while and you've had, I'm sure, several great leaders or not so great leaders. So let's talk about some of those other things like open door policy, trust. How do you get your team motivated, helping with retention?
Encourage them to continue to learn. And, maybe they're an accountant right now, but their goal is to be a personal trainer or join the circus or whatever that is. Maybe they're doing a great job for you, but continue to encourage them to follow their passions outside of work, because having that work-life balance and having happy employees it flows through all of your workspace. If you have someone that's upset all the time or unhappy in their life, that's going to trickle down into everything they do. So I've had employees that were great at customer service, and that was a very important role where I worked at that time. But they were terrible at organizing, which was another important aspect. And you just have to have that hard conversation and tell them, let's talk about why you're even in this role. Is this where you need to be? And it's a hard conversation, but ultimately that person decided to go a different path. It makes everything in your team better. And that that you've guided them on to where they need to be.
It's interesting because what I hear is you're not afraid to help them grow through feedback, good or constructive. And I think that's a talent. I don't think that's something that a lot of leaders are born with. I think you have to be intentional about it. And sometimes that is to leave the company, but sometimes it's just a different position at the company. Being the best teammate, and maybe this seat isn't the one, but you've got these great strengths to go over here.
100%. If you have a valuable employee, but maybe they're not great at accounting, or maybe they're not great at whatever role you have them in. But you see that they're outstanding in people skills and meeting people and generating trust outside the company and being that forefront. Maybe you maneuver their job task and put them more in a marketing role.
Right.
You know, if you realize that everyone has something to give, then you can find those things that they're great at and then tweak it to how it would benefit your team or your company.
I kind of want to, open the book a little bit because you've been at several sizes of companies, and, your tenure at CBRE, I mean, one of the largest, if not the largest commercial real estate company, lots of accountants, lots of team members, big teams. How do you navigate that? I mean, siloing people and, because they're not getting the broader picture, but you've got to figure out how to lead the right person, the right accounting talent, and then contrast that with maybe where you're at today at Plylar.
When I worked at CBRE, like you said, I think at the time I was there, we had like 200 accountants on the floor that I was on. And I had the benefit of having amazing leadership that welcomed you to develop your team. I had a team of like 8 or 10 people, so it was a much smaller team. But they gave me the reins to be able to develop my team how I wanted to develop them. We all had the same processes, doing the real estate transactions and things like that. But being able to have those conversations with individual team members and build them and help them follow their dreams was something that they really encouraged. Our leadership did. So, maybe that was me picking up from how they treated me, and then I passed that on to them. Having those mentors, has obviously made a huge impact on my career. But also, when I was there, they allowed me to take some courses and do some of those personality tests and to learn your management style. So they really gave us the tools, I feel like, to be a better manager. But you have to take advantage of those. Right. Otherwise, it doesn't do you any good.
Back to continuous learning, developing
Yes.
yourself, developing your team.
Very important.
Mentorship. It's interesting when I look at your career because big CBRE. Talk to us about Plylar. One, how did it come about? And two, going from a company the size of CBRE to Plylar, switching industries too, but what did that look like? And how was that discovery for you and for the owner?
So I moved from the south side of DFW to the north side, and my commute ended up being like 2 hours to get to my office. And I had a neighbor that told me about an opportunity there in Sherman, and I went and interviewed and got the job. It was, to me, it was God moving in my life. He, from the moment we decided to move, everything, God just worked it out for us. And moving up there, it was, you go from some place that's very structured, all the processes are documented and, very organized, to a family-owned company that at the time, the CFO before me had passed away. So they had gone 6 months without someone in that role. So I didn't have someone to tell me this is how we've done it. So I had to dig in and really figure it out on my own. But it gave me the opportunity to develop processes that we could use going forward. It almost gave me a blank slate.
Sure.
And I think that ended up working for the benefit for me, because I was able to, develop how I wanted to. I was able to pull some things that I had learned at CBRE, having process documents, having that We always I always called it, if I'm hit by a bus, like, this is what you need to do. And building those files, because they had just had that scenario at Plylar, where they had a CFO that passed away suddenly, and, so they didn't have anything in place. So that's something that I've been able to build in that way if, God forbid, something were to happen.
I hear this a lot with the founder owners that I talk to, whether it be the person, the unfortunate passing, or just leave and you weren't expecting it. They walk out the door with institutional knowledge. And I use this tool too, but have you used Scribe?
I have not.
Okay. A lot of people who are starting from scratch on,
Mm-hmm.
Process documents and those things, Scribe can do some screen captures just while you're working.
Mm-hmm.
And so it creates efficiencies. But the number of times that somebody's got to come in and now you've got to do the accounting and finance while you're figuring it out. And so you might as well build those processes.
Right.
Is there anything that stood out with you? Like the processes that maybe he's told you, like, oh my gosh, this is different or better or faster?
I think the feedback that I have gotten has been that the reports are clearer, maybe more. I really try to make sure that the owners are fully aware of what's going on and open up the books to them. Maybe they're not accounting minded or they just want to see that bottom line, but I always make sure that they have an opportunity. If they do have questions, again, open door, come in here if you have a question. Build that trust, because, you go back to trust being one of the most important aspects of having a good team. And so I feel like the owner and I have developed a good relationship where he's comfortable asking me any questions, vice versa. And we can have some of those hard conversations if we need to.
Well, you're in the place of full trust, right? A non-accountant who needs to make decisions based on the information that you're able to present. Have you found like storytelling or being able to talk in a non-accounting or finance way to him has been something you've fine-tuned, or did you already have that capability?
I think I'm still fine-tuning it because sometimes I forget that not everyone understands the financial, lingo, or you're talking about revenue, but they're thinking cash, or like sometimes you have to really draw a picture for them and put it more in their terms, but you need to understand where they're coming from to be able to do that. So if you're constantly speaking in ledger terms, then they're not going to necessarily understand it. So you need to understand what's important to them, so you can say, this will impact your bottom line this way. So they can kind of understand where you're coming from and why you think that this aspect of the reports is more important than this aspect. So they can kind of understand.
So tell us a little bit about Plylar. What does Plylar do? Number of employees? What does your team size look like? Just trying to get a picture of kind of the operations.
So Plylar is on their 4th generation of Plylars. They've been around for 60 plus years. We are commercial. Hold on. Plylar's commercial builders. So we do anywhere from doing the GC of a complete job to we have our MEP department. So that's your mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And then we also do steel fabrication and erection. So we can do a piece of a job or do the whole thing. And having those divisions and being so diversified has really helped, because there's certain times that you need a different division than maybe new builds has dropped off, but you need the mechanical to be able to pick up and do more of the renovations. So there's a bunch of different aspects, but being so diversified, I'm now managing 3 different companies in a sense, so understanding each of their needs has been a challenge since I've started there, but I try to have conversations with those leaders, each one in each division, to make sure that I'm meeting their needs and showing them the reports that they need.
All right, so three entities. And what is the, I guess employee size look like, and then go back to your team and managing, the scope of those?
So our entire company, we're about 100 employees. We have the GC team, and they're probably the smaller, but they handle more of the bigger projects. Mechanicals, about over a third of the company, and then we have our fabrication departments, another third. So my team, we only have 2 people that work directly underneath me right now. So being so small, we're constantly pulled in different ways. But it's a welcome challenge, because every day my day doesn't look the same as the last one. So I enjoy being in an environment like that is continually challenging me. But, just being in the construction industry right now in DFW is its own challenge. I mean, our growth that we have in this area, labor shortages, looking for skilled employees, and then, trying to source material with the tariffs that we're seeing. So it's every day is a new challenge and trying to navigate.
A lot of people that sit in your seat, company that size, you're the CFO, COO, like you said, you're wearing a lot of hats, and you are a trusted confidant of the family. So that has its own challenges too. But back to learning, you get to see a bigger picture. It sounds like you're answering a lot of these questions from an operational standpoint. I can tell it's like, fully understanding the whole business.
Yes, and I think that's important, even if you're not in the type of role that I am in operations. Even if you're only doing accounting and the financials, you need to kind of understand what the company's doing so you can understand the information that you're giving to your leadership. Even, working for a big company like CBRE, it's good to understand the different aspects. I mean, that's a huge company and they do so many different things, but you need to understand how your role impacts the company.
Yeah.
And where I am now, understanding if I misbook even just $50,000, that trickles down and maybe they're going to make a decision that they wouldn't have if I had not made that mistake. So everything you do ultimately impacts the whole company. And it may be a small thing, but that can trickle and make another big mistake, So it's important, I think, that you do understand, at least have a good understanding of what the company does.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not an electrician, but I do have those conversations so I can understand the pain points that our electricians have, so I can maybe make a better decision in operations.
Right. That makes sense. Well, so you've spanned a long career, and I guess as you think about, where you are now versus where you were even 10 years ago, is there something you would change? Is there something, or maybe you wish you would have known earlier on?
I think the main thing that, if I were to pick a regret, would be to go back and maybe set some better boundaries between my work life and my family life. When you work for a huge company, sometimes they don't understand that line that, hey, I'm off the clock, I'm with my family now.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just something that they put on me, it was something I put on myself.
Right.
I was the one that chose to take my laptop on vacation. I was the one that, was
As
sitting.
so many accountants do.
So many do.
Yeah.
sitting at sitting at a soccer game for my son, and I have my laptop open. I'm not fully present for him. And so I wish early on I would have set better boundaries for myself. Um, I think that would have made a, made me a happier employee, because I easily got burned out because I was taking work everywhere with me.
Well, and it's funny, right? You started earlier. You talked about that for your team, so you've adopted that into your leadership style. My question is, because this is a question. I mean, everybody talks about quality of life on both sides of the spectrum, right? You know, the very successful CEOs and whatever, like quality of life doesn't exist. It's all about integration, and but quality of life is a big thing. I think post COVID, I think a lot of people have started talking about it, and it means different things to different people. But if you're trying to get into your seat, and you've got that achiever mentality, how would you recommend balancing it? Or how, as somebody maybe sitting in an assistant controller seat or an accounting manager seat that still strives for more, but learning how to shut it off?
I'd say in the beginning, what I started doing is when I went on vacation, I would turn my work email off. I would make myself not check my email.
Yeah.
And just stop, I mean, you have to make yourself, and that's a little thing you can do. Then I quit taking my laptop to practices, or I started making sure that I'd had those talks with my manager, the leadership, and saying, this is something that's very important. I'll give you this, but I have to have this, and not being afraid of having those conversations, because ultimately work isn't everything. Right. Our family, our outside passions can be just as important. Maybe you don't have a family at home, but you want to learn a new skill or a new hobby. I mean, you need those breaks, otherwise you get so burned out. And you start becoming that toxic person in your team, and that doesn't do anyone any good.
Yeah. I think everybody's trying to figure out the balance, right? And maybe AI will help with that, with efficiencies. And I think you're right, being able to shut it off. I'm definitely an achiever. I definitely have a problem with shutting things off. Sometimes on vacation, my cell phone gets locked in the safe. Casey has the password. But you know what? Things go on.
Mm-hmm.
You addressed something that I've had conversations with recently. Toxic. It can be an employee or a manager, but how do you manage, or how have you seen it managed effectively when you've got somebody that it's like everybody on the team knows that person is maybe not healthy for the group, but still around?
Toxic people exist everywhere. And I think the first step that any manager needs to do is have that hard conversation with that person. Maybe they're unprofessional. Maybe they are angry and yelling in the office, or perhaps maybe they are. Maybe they're the opposite of that, and they're super bubbly and happy and all the things, but they're distracting everyone around them. I mean, we've all worked in those environments where you're like, I know you're going to need help in a week, but you're over there talking about, you've been over there for an hour talking about what you did last night. We've all been, and even though you may not say, oh, that's a toxic person, but they're still bringing down the team. So you need to have those hard conversations one-on-one. One of the worst things, and if you spoke to any junior level, they would probably agree with me, I would think. But these mass emails that go out, from leadership that, hey, we need to stop doing this, or we need you to focus on your work and not have these side conversations all the time, like these vague just have the conversation with the person that you're having the problem with.
Because everybody knows the person you're addressing.
Everybody
Yeah.
knows it.
Yeah.
Just have that conversation with them. And, it's uncomfortable. It's hard. But if you don't, you're going to continue to beat up the people that are not having that problem. And they're going to either wonder, well, I did have that 5-minute conversation, or I did react wrong in this scenario. Are they talking about me? And you just need to be clear and tell Bob in the office or Sue in the office, and you need to tell them, let's talk about this and have that hard conversation. As a manager, that's our job, to have those hard conversations. And I've been in so many situations where it was hard. I was shaking. I was nervous. I just knew they were going to throw something at me. But it made the relationship and made my team knew that I was going to have their back, hold everyone on the team accountable. And it made for a better environment.
You create a better culture because your team trusts you now. And that person, whatever it may be, maybe the word is incorrect in the way that we're saying it right now, because it isn't always toxicity. It could just be distractions or whatever. But maybe they don't even know that about themselves. Now, they might, but having that direct conversation, absolutely critical. And then if it doesn't change, you just have to start figuring out how to move them out.
And if maybe they don't know it's a problem,
right?
Maybe they know that they talk all the time, or whatever the case may be, but maybe they think, well, my boss hasn't said anything, so it's not a problem. I don't care if my counterpart has a problem with it. If you don't have that conversation with them and tell them this is a problem, they're never gonna know.
Yeah, that's true. So as you look forward, what are you excited about? What's on the horizons for you?
I'm really excited about the challenges that this new growth to DFW has brought. I think Plylar, we are in a great position to help our community navigate that, because I don't know if you know, but Sherman has seen an explosive amount of growth. And we are in a perfect location to be able to help our community out. And so that has brought new challenges, for our company, for all of our employees, trying to find the perfect balance of skilled labor and procurement for our materials. I like the challenges. I feel like we grow in those challenges, and that it gives great opportunities. So we'll learn through our mistakes, but I'm very excited about where we're positioned in the DFW area.
Well, it sounds like you've almost got it figured out, and the family's got a good financial leader sitting at the helm.
I definitely try.
Yeah.
And I think that's all we can do.
That's right. Well, I've appreciated it. Is there anything that we've missed? This has been a great conversation.
No, it's been great, catching up with you and having these open conversations. I really appreciate the invite.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm Troy Ashby. And remember, people are more than their titles, and companies are more than their balance sheets. Follow Beyond the Ledger so you never miss an episode.